woman. You always move from one man to another. So what? I am not married. For 3 months you'll stop. Stop what? No sleeping around, no late night visitations, no casual affairs.
You'll learn self-control or you lose everything. The company and other inheritance will go to your cousin if you fail.
That's ridiculous.
I will be assigning you a bodyguard. The bodyguard stays close day and night, no privacy, excuses, or manipulation. He will make sure you abide by the rules, no violation, no disobedience.
Bello sat at the center table like she owned the room. Not because she was loud, not because she tried, but because people looked at her without being asked to. Pearl was beauty, money, and power wrapped into one woman. She was the only daughter of Mrs. Amina Bello, the billionaire owner of the Bello group of companies. Pearl did not chase wealth. Wealth followed her. Money obeyed her voice. Doors opened when her name was mentioned. Restaurants recognized her face before they confirmed her reservation. Hotel managers smiled before she spoke. Men noticed her even before she entered the room. She was young, she was confident, and she was reckless. Pearl had everything most people only dreamed about. Private jets, luxury homes, unlimited access, and a name that carried weight everywhere. The Bellos. She lived fast and expected the world to keep up. She loved attention. She loved being wanted, and she never stayed with one man for long. Different men filled her nights. Short desires, quick excitement, no emotions, no attachment. She enjoyed the chase. She enjoyed the control. She enjoyed knowing the money and beauty gave her freedom. Men came easily into her life, and they left even easier. Some stayed for gifts, some stayed for access, some stayed because being with her made them feel important. None stayed long enough to matter. Tonight, Pearl sat across from her mother at an expensive restaurant. Soft music played in the background. Wine glasses reflected warm light. Pearl scrolled through her phone lazily while sipping her wine. Her mother, Madame Rose Bello, sat calmly across from her. She did not scroll. She did not rush. Her presence commanded respect without noise. While she studied the menu carefully, Pearl's eyes wandered, not to the food, but to the waiter. She noticed his walk, his calm smile, the way he carried himself with quiet confidence. The waiter approached their table. "Good afternoon, ma'am," he said politely. "Are you ready to order?" "Yes," Pearl replied casually, barely looking up. "Seafood okra soup, fish or meat, ma'am?" "Fish," Pearl replied. The waiter turned respectfully to her mother. "And you, madam?" "I will have the same," Mrs. Bello said calmly. As the waiter walked away, Pearl's eyes followed him for a moment, longer than necessary. "Young men in this city are improving," Pearl said lightly, a small smile on her lips. Her mother sighed softly. "Pearl." "What?" Pearl asked without shame. "I only noticed." Her mother did not reply. She returned her attention to the table, but her silence spoke louder than words. Later that night, Pearl insisted on driving herself home. She enjoyed moments like that, the silence after noise, the empty road, the feeling of control behind the wheel. It made her feel powerful. Her phone buzzed, a message from a man she had met just 2 days earlier. She glanced at the screen, then locked the phone without replying. By the next morning, she would not remember his name. That was her pattern. Pearl lived alone in a large glass house overlooking the city. The house was beautiful, expensive, and cold. Different men had passed through those doors over time. Some left before sunrise, some stayed just long enough to feel chosen. But the moment they wanted more, Pearl ended it. She didn't like explanations. She didn't like emotions. She didn't like commitment. Money made exist easy. Her mother watched all this quietly. One evening, Mrs. Bello asked Pearl to join her in the study. Pearl walked in confidently, heels clicking against the floor. "What is this about?" she asked. Mrs. Bello folded her hands calmly. "Sit." Pearl sat, still relaxed. "I am retiring soon," her mother said evenly, "and I intend to hand over the company." Pearl smiled, already expecting it. "That is normal." But before that, Mrs. Bello continued, her voice steady. "There is a problem we must address." Pearl raised an eyebrow. "Which problem?" "Your lifestyle," her mother said plainly. Pearl laughed softly. "You mean my personal life?" "Yes," Mrs. Bello replied. "Because it stopped being personal the moment it began to control you." Pearl leaned back. "Mother, I work hard. I enjoy my life. I harm no one." "You harm yourself," Mrs. Bello said. "You use men the same way you use money, quickly and without care." Pearl's smile faded slightly. "You move from one man to another," her mother continued. "No discipline, no restraint, no boundaries." "So what?" Pearl snapped. "I am not married. That is not the issue," Mrs. Bello said calmly. "The issue is that you cannot stop, even when you should." Silence filled the room. "For 3 months," Mrs. Bello said, sliding a document across the table. "You will stop." Pearl frowned. "Stop what?"
What?
Her mother's voice became firm.
Sleeping around.
"No sleeping
No
around with
late
men,
night
no
visitation.
late night
No
visitors,
casual affairs.
no casual affairs, no using money to buy attention or desire." Pearl stood sharply. "That is ridiculous."
Ridiculous.
"You will learn control," Mrs. Bello replied, "or you will lose everything." Pearl froze. "The company," her mother added, "will go to your cousin if you fail." Slowly, Pearl sat back down. "And how do you plan to enforce this?" she asked carefully. Mrs. Bello did not hesitate. "I am assigning you a bodyguard." Pearl laughed in disbelief. "A bodyguard?" "Yes," her mother said. "A man trained to protect you and to observe you." Pearl's eyes narrowed. "So you want to watch my private life?" "I want to stop you from destroying it," Mrs. Bello replied. Pearl clenched her jaw. "The bodyguard stays close," her mother continued. "Day and night. No privacy excuses. No manipulation." Pearl exhaled slowly. "Who is he?" "You meet him on Monday," Mrs. Bello said. Pearl stared at the document again. For the first time in years, money could not free her. That night, Pearl did not sleep well. She lay awake in her large bedroom, staring at the ceiling. The house felt unusually quiet. No late night laughter, no familiar presence, just silence pressing in. By morning, irritation replaced fear. At breakfast, she found her mother already seated, calmly reading the newspaper. "So this is really happening," Pearl said, pouring herself coffee. "Yes," Mrs. Bello replied without looking up. Pearl scoffed. "You are treating me like a child." Mrs. Bello folded the paper and met her gaze. "No," she said. "I'm treating you like a woman who has been running from emptiness for too long." Pearl stiffened. "I don't run from anything." "You run from stillness," her mother replied. "You don't know how to sit alone with yourself." Pearl laughed dryly. "That is psychology talk." "It is truth," Mrs. Bello said. "You surround yourself with people so you don't have to face silence." Pearl looked away. "You mistake freedom for lack of discipline," her mother continued. You think desire is control, but it controls you. Pearl placed her cup down slowly. Hiring a bodyguard is extreme. It is necessary, Mrs. Bello said. You don't listen to advice. You respect structure. Pearl crossed her arms. And if I break the rules? Mrs. Bello answered calmly. Then you lose everything. Silence filled the room. For the first time in her life, Pearl Bello understood something terrifying. She could not buy her way out. Pearl stood up suddenly and began to pace the room. Her heels tapped sharply against the floor, echoing her frustration. You don't trust me, she said, not turning back. I trust your intelligence, her mother answered. I do not trust your impulses. Pearl stopped pacing. And what if I feel something? She asked quietly. What if I want someone? Mrs. Bello met her eyes without hesitation. Wanting is not the problem, she said. Acting without restraint is. She paused, letting the words sink in. You have never learned patience, Pearl. This is where it starts. And the bodyguard? She asked, forcing calm into her voice. Is he aware of all this? Yes, her mother replied. He understands his assignment clearly. Pearl smirked. So he will report my every move? He will report violations, Mrs. Bello corrected. Not curiosity, not conversation, only disobedience. Pearl shook her head slowly. You are putting a man in my space and telling me not to cross line? That is exactly the point, her mother said. Pearl felt heat rise in her chest. Anger mixed with something unfamiliar. Not fear, not excitement, something deeper. For 3 months, Mrs. Bello continued, you will live differently. No secret meetings, no night guests, no distractions. Pearl leaned against the table, gripping its edge. And if I succeed? You earn my trust, her mother said. And the company. Pearl straightened her back. Fine, she said. I will play your game. Mrs. Bello nodded calmly. Good. Pearl turned to leave, then stopped at the door. What is his name? She asked without turning around. Her mother answered evenly. Daniel Adebayo. Pearl coughed softly. Let's see how long he lasts. She walked out of the room, unaware that for the first time in her life, the rules were no longer hers to bend. Monday morning came faster than Pearl expected. She stood by the large glass window of her living room, dressed sharply for work, arms folded tightly across her chest. Her face looked calm, but irritation burned beneath the surface. She hated surprises. She hated supervision even more. A car pulled into the compound. Pearl watched carefully as a tall man stepped out. He moved with quiet confidence. Not rushed, not lazy. His posture was straight. His eyes were alert. He wore a simple dark suit, clean and neat, with no sign of unnecessary pride. Mrs. Bello walked in behind her. That is him, she said. Pearl didn't turn. He doesn't look special. Her mother replied calmly. That is exactly why I chose him. The doorbell rang. Pearl sighed and walked towards the door, opening it slowly. The man stood there. Good morning, ma'am, he said respectfully. My name is Daniel Adebayo. His voice was calm, controlled, steady. Pearl studied him openly, the way she usually studied men. But something felt different. He wasn't impressed. He didn't stare. He didn't smile too much at her. I assume you know why you are here, Pearl said. Yes, ma'am, Daniel replied. I am here to protect you and ensure your safety. Pearl smirked. Only that? Daniel met her eyes, and to follow the instructions given to me, Mrs. Bello stepped forward. Daniel, these are the rules, she said clearly. You stay with Belle during work hours and outside when necessary. You do not leave her alone with men in private settings. You report only serious violations. Daniel nodded once. Understood. Belle laughed softly. So you are my shadow now? If that's how you see it, ma'am. Daniel replied evenly. Belle turned to her mother. You really think this will work? Mrs. Bello answered without doubt. I know it will. Belle grabbed her bag. Let's go. The drive to the office was quiet. Belle broke the silence on purpose. So, she said casually, do you always follow women around for a living? Daniel kept his eyes on the road. I follow assignments. Are you married? Belle asked. That is personal, Daniel replied politely. Belle smiled slightly. Interesting. At the office, heads turned as Belle walked in, and even more when Daniel followed closely behind her. Whispers filled the air. That is her new man. No, that looks official. Belle enjoyed attention, but today it felt different. Daniel didn't react. He didn't enjoy the stares. He ignored them completely. Inside her office, Belle dropped into her chair. You can stand anywhere, she said. This is my space. Daniel nodded and stood near the door. Minutes passed. Belle shifted uncomfortably. She wasn't used to a man being near her without trying to impress her, flirt with her, or please her. You are quiet, she said. I am walking, Daniel replied. Belle laughed softly. Watching me breathe? Making sure you are safe, he answered calmly. A male colleague knocked and entered without waiting. Belle, about last night. Daniel stepped forward immediately. Sir, he said firmly but politely. This is a work environment. The man froze, clearly embarrassed. Belle raised an eyebrow. That will be all, she said to the colleague. When the door closed, Belle turned slowly. You didn't ask me before stepping in, she said. Daniel met her gaze. You hired me to enforce boundaries. Something twisted in Belle's chest. Irritation mixed with respect. You are bold, she said. I am disciplined, Daniel replied. Belle leaned back in her chair. For the first time in a long while, a man had stood between her and her habits, and she didn't know how to feel about it. Belle's day felt longer than usual. Every move she made, Daniel was there, silent, alert, respectful. He did not crowd her, but he never disappeared. His presence felt solid, like a wall she could not walk through. By lunchtime, Belle was already frustrated. She picked up her phone and typed a message to caller, one of the men from her past. Come over tonight. Almost immediately, Daniel spoke. Ma'am, he said calmly, that would be a violation. Belle froze and turned slowly. You read my phone now? No, Daniel replied. You said it out loud. Belle clenched her jaw. You are not my conscience. I am your assignment, he said evenly. She stood up suddenly. You are enjoying this. I am doing my job, Daniel replied. Belle walked towards him, stopping very close. And what if I tell you to leave? She asked softly. Daniel did not move. I can't. Belle laughed quietly. So you don't take orders from me? I take orders from your mother, he said calmly. That annoyed her more than she expected. Later that evening, Belle grabbed her keys. I am not a prisoner, she said. Daniel followed without argument. At the lounge, the lights were low and the music slow. Familiar faces welcomed Belle. Men smiled, some confidently, some cautiously. One approached her. Pearl, he said warmly, leaning in. You've been quiet lately. Daniel stepped closer, not touching her, but close enough to make his presence impossible to ignore. Pearl felt the tension rise, and for the first time, temptation did not feel simple. This isn't necessary, Pearl said sharply, her voice tight with irritation. Daniel leaned slightly towards her, lowering his voice so only she could hear. You asked me to stop you from your old habits, he said calmly. Pearl exhaled hard, gripping her glass. She hated that he was right. She hated that he didn't sound proud of it. The man standing in front of her shifted awkwardly, smiled once more, then stepped away. Pearl turned back to Daniel. You are ruining my phone, she said. Daniel didn't react. I am protecting your future. That word, future, irritated her more than anything else. They left the lounge earlier than Pearl wanted. Inside the car, the silence felt thick. The city lights passed by the windows, but Pearl barely noticed them. You think you are better than them? She said suddenly, breaking the quiet. Daniel kept his eyes on the road. No! She turned towards him. Then what? I think boundaries matter, he replied. Pearl laughed bitterly. I've always had boundaries. I just choose when to cross them. Daniel glanced at her briefly. That is the problem. His words landed heavier than she expected. Neither of them spoke again until they reached her house. At the entrance, Pearl stopped and turned to him. You can leave now, she said. I will wait outside, Daniel replied. She hesitated, surprised by the calm certainty in his voice. You don't trust me at all, do you? She asked quietly. Daniel didn't avoid the question. Trust is built, not assumed, he said. Pearl nodded slowly and walked inside alone. That night, sleep refused to come. She lay on her bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind replaying his calm voice, his steady presence, his refusal to bend. For the first time in years, temptation didn't come from desire alone. It came from denial. By the fifth day, Pearl realized something was wrong. Not outside, inside her. She woke up earlier than usual, restless. Her body felt tense, alert. Her phone lay beside her silent. No messages, no missed calls, no one waiting. She stared at the screen for a long moment, then locked it. For the first time in a long time, there was no man to distract her thoughts. In the bathroom, she stood under the shower longer than necessary, letting the water run. She closed her eyes, then opened them quickly, annoyed with herself. This is ridiculous, she muttered. When she stepped out, Daniel was already standing outside her bedroom door, exactly where he was supposed to be. Good morning, ma'am, he said respectfully. Pearl studied him. He looked calm, controlled, completely untouched by the storm inside her. Do you ever feel temptation? She asked suddenly. Daniel paused. Yes. And she pressed. And I don't act on it, he said. She scoffed. That must be easy for you. It is not, Daniel replied. Discipline is trained. At the office, Pearl tried to drown herself in work. Meetings stretched, emails piled up, yet her mind kept drifting. She noticed things she had ignored before. How Daniel stood slightly behind her. How his eyes scanned rooms without staring. How he corrected men politely when they stood too close. Then it happened. The former lover walked into her office without knocking. Pearl, he said warmly. I've been calling. Before Pearl could respond, Daniel stepped forward. You need an appointment, he said firmly. The man laughed. Relax, she knows me. Daniel turned slightly towards Pearl. Ma'am, Pearl hesitated. Every old instinct screamed at her to wave Daniel away, but she didn't. Please leave, she said quietly. The man stared, shocked, then walked out. The door closed. Silence filled the room. Pearl sat down slowly. That wasn't easy, she admitted. Daniel nodded. But you did it. Later that evening, Pearl dressed up without knowing why. She stood in front of the mirror, adjusting her dress, fixing her hair. Then she stopped. What am I even dressing for? She whispered. When she stepped out, Daniel noticed immediately. You look presentable, he said carefully. Only presentable? She asked, amused. Yes, he replied. She laughed, shaking her head. On the drive home, Pearl spoke softly. I used to fill my nights with men because I hated being alone. Daniel listened. When the house was quiet, she continued. My thoughts were loud. And now, he asked. She stared at the window. Now, I hear everything. That night, Pearl lay awake again. Her body wanted familiarity. Her mind wanted peace. For the first time, those two desires were fighting. She closed her eyes and breathed deeply. Didn't reach for anyone else to escape her, and that scared her. The days blurred together. Pearl followed the rules, not easily, but honestly. She stopped checking her phones constantly. She stopped planning her nights around company. She started noticing silence. You've been quiet today, Daniel said one afternoon. Am I allowed to be? She asked. Yes, he replied, just not reckless. She smiled faintly. You enjoy that word. Because it matters, he said. She leaned back. Do you know why I never stayed with one man? I can guess, Daniel replied. They always wanted more, she said. And when they get close, I push them away. Distance feels safer, Daniel said. She looked at him sharply. Exactly. At a business function later that evening, men approached her confidently. One held her hand too long. Pearl gently pulled away herself. Daniel noticed, surprised. You didn't need to step in, she said quietly. You handled it, he replied. That moment stayed with her. On the drive home, rain poured heavily. What happens after 3 months? Pearl asked suddenly. My assignment ends, Daniel said. And then, she asked, I return to my life. I don't like the idea of you leaving, she said calmly. Ma'am, I know, she interrupted. Rules. At her door, she stopped again. Why don't you ever cross lines with me? She asked. Because crossing lines is easy, Daniel said. Respect is harder. Her throat tightened. She went inside without another word. At the office later that day, Pearl's mother requested a private meeting. Mrs. Bello studied her daughter closely as Pearl sat across from her. You look different, she said. Pearl shifted slightly. Different? How? Calmer, her mother replied. More present, like you are finally here. Pearl said nothing, but her fingers tightened in her lap. Mrs. Bello smiled faintly. She didn't press further. That evening, Pearl returned home earlier than usual. The house was quiet, but this time it didn't feel empty. She stood in the living room for long moments, then spoke softly. Daniel. Yes, ma, he replied from behind her. Sit, she said. Daniel hesitated, then sat across from her, leaving space between them. Pearl took a deep breath. I used to think control meant doing whatever I wanted, she said slowly. No limits, no explanations. Daniel listened without interrupting. But now, she continued, I see that control is knowing when to stop. She looked up at him. I don't miss the chaos, she said. I miss being understood. Daniel's voice was low and steady. You are understood. Pearl's head snapped up. By you? Yes, he said simply. The air in the room felt heavier, closer. Pearl stood and paced a few steps, then turned back. If I crossed the line, she asked quietly, what would you do? Daniel stood up slowly, careful with every movement. I would step back, he said, and remind you why the line exists. Pearl swallowed. She took one step toward him, then stopped herself. I've never stopped myself before, she admitted. Daniel's voice softened. You just did. That night, Pearl lay awake, but the restlessness felt different. It wasn't about what she wanted to take. It was about what she was choosing to protect. And for the first time, that choice felt different. The 3 months ended quietly. No announcement, no countdown, no dramatic moment. Pearl stood in front of her mirror one morning, adjusting her earrings, when she realized something strange. She was no longer counting days. She didn't feel restricted. She felt settled. Outside, Daniel waited as usual, but his presence no longer felt like supervision. It felt like home. On the drive to work, Pearl spoke softly. Do you know what scares me the most? She asked. Daniel glanced at her. What? That I don't miss my old life, she said. Not even a little. Daniel nodded. That means you've grown. Pearl shook her head gently. No, it means I've chosen. That evening, Mrs. Bello invited them both to dinner. After the meal, she asked Daniel to excuse them. When he left the room, Mrs. Bello turned to her daughter. The 3 months are over, she said. You followed every rule. Pearl nodded. You can return to your old freedom now, her mother continued. The company is yours. Pearl inhaled deeply. I don't want my old freedom, she said calmly. Mrs. Bello studied her. Why? Because freedom without purpose is empty. Pearl replied. And now, I understand that. Her mother smiled knowingly. And Daniel? She asked. Pearl hesitated, not from fear, but from honesty. I didn't plan to fall in love with him, she said. He never chased me, never crossed the line, never used me. She paused, her voice steady. He stayed when everyone else came and went. Mrs. Bello nodded slowly. And what do you want now? Pearl answered without doubt. 1 man, 1 home, and 1 life. That night, Pearl asked Daniel to sit with her, not as her guard, not as her assignment, but as a man. The rules are over, she said quietly. You are free to leave. Daniel met her eyes. And if I don't want to? Pearl's breath caught. Then stay, she said. Not because you are paid to, but because you chose to. Daniel stood slowly. I chose you a long time ago, he said. I just respected you enough to wait. Pearl's eyes filled with tears, not from pain, but from certainty. For the first time in her life, she didn't reach for excitement. She wished for commitment. Months later, Pearl Bello stood before family and friends, holding Daniel's hand. No crowd of admirers, no chaos, no escape routes, just peace. She had lived a life of many men and found fulfillment in one. Not because she was forced, but because she finally knew who she was. Pearl learned that many companions cannot replace one true partner. Peace comes when desire is guided, not followed blindly. And love stays where respect lives.
Thank you for watching. If you love this story, like, subscribe.
And come back for more interesting story like this.